Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another gregarious episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Thank you so much, Blake. I do this all the time. Yeah. Probably about every 3 or 4 weeks, I say, you know, I haven't even mentioned Blake's name in like a month.
Yeah.
So this is Blake Osborne.
I am Blake
He's
Osborne.
my co-host and the executive producer of The Gold Standard. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't know that, now you know.
Yeah. And now you can replace me with a Muppet.
Yeah. Well, shh. Don't tell people.
Okay.
Actually, I like that. Welcome back to The Gold Standard. I am your host, Alan Mosley. Guys, if you want to follow us on social media, it is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. You can follow me on Twitter, where you can share in all my hate speech and reflections, which is at Alan M. Mosley. And really, you don't have to do any of that because you can just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
Now found, not just on YouTube, but all your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, including iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
We're so excited.
It's almost like a real show.
Yeah, almost.
And this is kind of like the season 2 premiere of The Gold Standard.
It is. You're right, it is, isn't it?
And when I think of throwing off the old and embracing the warmth and glow of the new, I think of our guest that we have today.
That's right.
Today we have Michael Boldin,
there he is,
who is the founder and executive director of the 10th Amendment Center, which you can find at 10thamendmentcenter.com. He also hosts the Thrice a Week podcast. I think that's
Thrice
a Week podcast. Good Morning Liberty.
How's it going?
Which you can tune into on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. Michael Boldin, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
This is the kickoff episode of season 2.
You're the season 2 premiere.
That's right.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Did my people
This has to be your best episode ever.
Well, I mean, you managed to get into your studio without locking the door, so you're already way above.
Oh no, the door's locked. I can't get out.
Well,
so we're ready for the 8-hour telethon.
Yeah, but that's not my problem, so we're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got lots of fun stuff to talk about, but I want to share a story real quick with people at home. So as our viewers know, I took a really brief hiatus to go down to New Orleans for the Take Human Action Bash, which was hosted right before the Libertarian Party convention. It was hosted by the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. It was a really awesome event, had tons of great speakers, Walter Block, Scott Horton, Bob Murphy.
Episode 32.
Yeah. Episode what?
Episode 30.
Woods.
What?
Yeah, Tom Woods. Well, of course, but I was trying to build up to, but the most amazing speaker was a last-second fill-in for the comedian Dave Smith, a guy who came in with no preparation. He's never even spoken in front of a live audience before in his life, was Michael Boldin, and he absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Awesome.
And I actually have a treasured heirloom here. It's the only thing that I have in my possession from my trip to New Orleans. This was given to me. I'm showing this to everybody at home.
On there for me to see.
Yeah.
There it is.
I'm showing this to everybody at home. This is Traditional Medicinals Laxative Teas Smooth Move Chocolate.
Smooth Move.
So for everybody at home, now you know when you're full of shit, you go to the 10th Amendment Center and you talk to Michael Boldin.
The question is, does anyone know why I gave that to you?
Well, that's not important. That's not. Quit stealing my thunder.
We'll just say Alan was having a little difficulty after the beautiful New Orleans food, and I had offered him some help if he wanted it, but recommended that he not take that before a road trip.
Yes, you did say that, but I had only basically been there one afternoon and night, and I had already eaten enough for the weekend. Yeah. I was done. It was already over. I didn't need to eat Saturday or Sunday. That's stupid.
So we can do restaurant reviews?
Oh yeah. Well, what was that place we went to where y'all eat gator or something ridiculous?
Oh, I have a rattlesnake sausage down the street here.
Oh, really? See,
come visit.
See, I would love to, but I don't know if I have the correct papers to make it into that country and back.
They check your passport at the Nevada border.
They're going to check mine, that's for sure. So, Michael Boldin, founder and executive director of the 10th Amendment Center. How long now? How long has the 10th Amendment Center been with us?
2006.
2006. So almost like a real organization, almost.
Yeah, and in fact, sometimes it kind of works against us. I mean, as you'll see, we are here this is my spare bedroom, which is now converted into an office. And for most of those 12 plus years, I have operated this entire organization out of a bedroom.
Wow.
Rarely wearing pants, of course. But between myself, Mike Meharry, and a number of volunteers and other people who have worked with us over the years, we're generally all working from home. I did set up an office for a while, but a lot of times that works against us. Our website looks kind of nice, or it did a few years ago. It's a little outdated, and people think we have some giant building, like we're like the Cato Institute.
Yeah.
And I had done some analysis a few years ago, and between, I think it was Heritage Foundation and the Southern Poverty Law Center, who absolutely loves me, both of them, they raise our yearly budget every 8 minutes.
Wow.
Wow.
And so Woods, my very great friend, amazing supporter for so many years, basically kind of saved this organization from closure a few times by getting the word out when we were basically out of cash. But he often has said that, 10th Amendment Center actually gets more done than all like the Catos and the DC think tanks out there with millions and millions of dollars. I believe we do. So we're definitely punching above our weight class.
Oh, I definitely agree. Now, we've had your communications director, Mike Meharry, on the show a number of times. Mike and I actually just recently started a sports program called Sports Ball with Mike and Alan, which is a lot of fun. But it's good that we can have fun on a show like that, because every time he comes on the Gold Standard, he's just bitching about nullification or some BS. I can't even get a word out of him. Communications director, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, we got to give him a title.
Well, there you go.
Mike's a bit of a prima donna.
I hope to someday have a title. I mean, other than, ex-con or...
And incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Michael, I don't want to kill a bunch of time here. Let's just jump right into it. So,
okay.
Immigration, are you any good?
Am I good?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Are you any good on immigration?
Well, define what that means. I'm good on everything, except where I suck, and then I learn and I get better over time.
Well,
I used to be a Marxist.
I'm really just poking
fun at you. So if you would have
you.
asked me 15 years ago, nah, not 15. I had already been transitioning out at that point, but maybe early 2000s, I would have definitely identified as a Marxist, some kind of a communist. And I would have thought, if you would have asked me, are you good on airline bailouts? My response would have been like, absolutely. The government's been pouring all this money into the airlines. The government should just own them. But I was completely ignorant, clearly, right? So some things that I think I'm great at now, I'm probably awful. So let's see.
Well, let me ask you this though. So when you were in your edgy Marxist phase, was that because of influences around you, or was that because you had done some reading and decided, oh yeah, man, this is the way to go?
Well, I think it's twofold. One, I was raised in a very, very strict Catholic family, in a way that over the top, where I've talked to many other Catholics and they're like, oh man, that's a way to scare people away from being Catholic. Basically, I quickly developed my self-defense was reject all authority. So I first was drawn to Marxism as cool and edgy because it was just not Democrat and Republican. That was one thing. But then I did do some reading. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. Mind you, it made sense because the city I grew up in, Milwaukee, was the last major city with a socialist elected mayor. So it's a very progressive to socialist Green Party leaning city, and it was through my entire childhood. So I just had a propensity towards that. I was also a product of government schools. Mind you, we all, even if you went to a private school, and I did for grade school, it's still a government-approved private school. And when I was in Catholic school, of course, I learned the underlying message was, even if I was learning about government and things like that, the underlying message was, okay, the bottom line is the fix to everything is Catholicism. So then as I transferred to government schools, the bottom line I learned on everything is if there's a problem, the solution is government. So this, I was indoctrinated. We've all been indoctrinated to learn that government is a solution to all of our problems. And it really was very difficult to get out of that. Where I actually made some transition was because I became an active anti-war activist. And I just started seeing over the years that people weren't really anti-war in that movement, especially during the Bush years. There were huge anti-war protests here in Los Angeles, for example, but they weren't really anti-war as we saw the transition to just, the message was, anti-war, but to spend that money on domestic programs. And I just started thinking, like, why don't they just stay anti-war? So that was kind of that process. That's the short answer.
Yeah, no, that's really concise. I liked it. Well, let me ask you the same question, but fast forward a few years. What kind of self-study, or what were the external influences that brought you over to more the liberty message?
Okay, Harry Browne.
Amen.
Wow.
You just heard that the last 3 or 4 weeks in a row. You've heard Harry Browne on the show.
Did Wood say that too?
Yeah. So we talked about Harry Browne with Woods. We talked about Harry Browne with Jeff Deist. Like, all the heavy hitters are coming on the Gold Standard and saying, ignore all this and talk about Harry Browne. Yeah.
Jeff gave a great speech at a Mises Institute event early in 2017. Jeff was there, Tom was there, I was on Tom's panel in San Diego last year. And it was basically it was taken from Harry's great book, How to Find Freedom in an Unfree World. How do you become more free? How can you live more free? So Jeff is clearly an acolyte or a preacher of the message of Harry. Harry passed away a number of years ago. He was a Libertarian Party candidate in 96 and 2000, probably the last good one. But before that, he was just an author and an investment advisor, just an expert. He wrote this book in the early 70s, How to Profit from the Coming Devaluation, knowing that the gold standard was being ended. It was being decoupled from the dollar. And he was warning people, like, this is going to be a problem. So put your money in gold because it's going to shoot way up as soon as they stop suppressing it. So he built some fame off of that. But he was an incredible messenger for liberty. He basically, when he was running for office, he wrote a number of books, like Why Government Doesn't Work. And I started listening to late night radio shows. I guess we'd call them podcasts these days. But in my transition, while I was an anti-war activist, I still am. But because there is no anti-war movement in the street, I just say was, I guess. So I started listening to all kinds of stuff. I was just craving information, but I was drawn to Harry's weekly show because I was able to listen while working on Saturday nights at like 10 p.m. And I just kept learning that every time government promises something, it either costs way more than what they said it was going to do if they can accomplish it, or they just flat out lied on what they were going to do. So I just started learning that government doesn't work, and that kind of spilled over into my anti-war activism. These people who are supposedly opposing these foreign wars just want more health care and government-run schooling at home. But if it doesn't work overseas, why would it work at home? And the conservatives are the other way around. They think nothing works at home, but the same programs are going to work in foreign policy. So they're all getting it wrong, and it just took that realization. Harry was kind of the lead on that, and I still have a soft spot. Our 10th Amendment Center Facebook page, at least once a week, we're going to whoever manages it. I think one of his daughter manages the Harry Browne Facebook page. We're sharing quotes from him pretty regularly because they're great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a treasure trove. We do the same thing. So everybody who's been on the show that's talked about Harry Browne is, of course, I mean, there's the obvious things. Of course, he was tall, he was well-spoken, he was well-educated, well-dressed. I mean, he's your prototypical front man. I mean, he's a great candidate if you're going to run somebody for the LP. That's the kind of guy you want. But that he's so solid and can convey the message so well. So, I mean, everything is a 10 of 10. But I'll always remember what Jeff Deist said kind of in relation to a Harry Browne is, you know, when you hear people talk about the liberty movement, you know, in quotations, I'm kind of over that. I'm kind of just done with worrying about the libertarian community or the liberty movement. Oh yeah,
he had an article about that recently too, right?
What he wrote, which I think was so good, is that if you're really about culture being, or politics being downstream of culture, and if you're worried about hearts and minds and all this, you know, cliche BS. What you really ought to be worried about is you in the individual. You need to be a successful libertarian. That's what you need to do. If you're a successful libertarian, then you will breed more successful libertarians.
Yeah, that was his message at the speech in San Diego last year too. Like, build yourself up, be as strong. And now, mind you, that is part and parcel. Even if we're avoiding the liberty movement. I learned from another friend, Anthony Gregory, years ago, that the most successful way to encourage people to be more successful is to encourage them to do more of what they want to do. Now, some people want to be entrepreneurs and breed success. Other people want to do podcasts. Podcasts doesn't make you an economic success in most situations. So everybody has a part to play. And I think whatever motivates an individual is a piece of that puzzle.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit here. Something I've said on the show, I think I've said this on the show before. It's one of my newest, biggest pet peeves, and it's the whataboutisms. It's the people that, if you're wearing your Jefferson shirt right there, if you say, I know, I swear to God, this is the last episode of the Gold Standard. So if you make a comment along the lines of, Thomas Jefferson was tall, if the next 17 comments to yours is, well, yeah, but Adams was shorter, that I'm not talking about Adams. This is about Thomas Jefferson. So the whataboutisms really are.
Do you get that a lot from locals in Tennessee, Trump supporters?
Oh, Lord. Michael.
So I've been attacking this pretty aggressively lately because I think what separates 10th Amendment Center from many other groups is that we don't give a shit who the president is. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, there is no excuse. So when we point out that the Trump administration, okay, let me back up. I think most people would agree that Obama was a horrible gun grabber, right?
Yes.
Gun rights people can't stand Obama because he was awful and he wanted to do much more than what he actually did. To take away our right to keep, well, he doesn't take it away, but to block our right to keep and bear arms.
Sure.
Well, the fact of the matter is that in every category across the board, in Trump's first year in office, the ATF, under his leadership, has increased enforcement of federal gun control over Obama. This is a fact. The numbers come right from the ATF. And we hear from some people, oh, wow, that's not good news. Maybe he doesn't know about it. Well, he's just ignorant. Okay, that is an improvement. Being ignorant and making things worse doesn't help. Right. Maybe he's on board. That's also bad. Some people say, but Hillary would have been so much worse. Well, Obama wasn't worse, and part of the reason is because he wasn't NRA backed, so a lot of the people just did things to oppose them.
Sure.
So when Trump's in office, in a way, it almost ends up being worse because when his federal ATF does bad things, you don't find opposition because people are in tune with the guy rather than the principle. So it's but Hillary all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
Hillary's not there. Hillary is not taking our rights away.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I'm so sick of the well, it would have beens and the whataboutisms. They're really getting under my crawl. But I do have to say, I want to point this out to people at home. The 10th Amendment Center, they actually have principles. And this is something I took a lot of heat for when I said this on the show. It has nothing to do with the 10th Amendment Center, by the way. I didn't take heat for supporting the 10th Amendment Center. Well, then we should
just skip it.
Yeah, right? No, I mean, everybody loves the 10th Amendment Center, as they should. But I took a lot of heat when I was on the show the last few weeks, and I said the problem that the whataboutisms, the polling numbers, all that, the problem is that most people don't have any principles. And I took heat. I had people saying, well, just because people disagree with you, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no. It's so wonderful having principles. You know why? Because I don't have to sit down and mull for hours on end for every single issue that comes up in politics or life. Because if you have bedrock principles that are guiding how you live your life and how you make your decisions, things become so much more clear and easy. It's that logical consistency that you should be striving for. And I applaud the 10th Amendment Center for being the type of organization that has principles, that shows I don't care if Clinton did it, I don't care if Bush did it, I don't care if Obama did it, and I don't care if Trump's doing it now. If it's right, it's right, and we'll let people know, hey, this was a good move, we're moving in the right direction. But way more often than not, we're going in the wrong way, it's wrong.
One thing I'm also trying to avoid doing is a lot of people that, again, I don't come from the conservative end of the spectrum, so I don't feel a need to explain away. And I've rejected the progressive end of the spectrum as well. So I also don't feel a need to explain away. A lot of people that come from the right towards liberty, if they want to say that Trump is horrible on asset forfeiture, they'll start it out by saying, you know what, I really like the fact that Trump has cut regulations, but he's been really bad on surveillance, asset forfeiture, gun control, war powers, etc. You don't have to start by praising someone. We're not being like a customer service manager to our team trying to motivate them to do the work. We're just pointing out what they're doing right and wrong. So certainly, asset forfeiture, surveillance, guns, war. Trump has been bad, if not worse than Obama on many of these issues, and on the spending too. I am happy to say where I think he's done a good thing.
Go on.
Sure.
Meeting with North Korea.
Yes.
I literally, because war was really always the number one thing for me, and we've got to be very grateful to Jared LaBelle and the Libertarian Institute for the Twitter campaign yesterday with the hashtag Why I Am Anti-War on September 11th, talking about how, well, why I am anti-war, to bring people together, especially in this whole unnamed liberty movement where people fight over the most minor things. They fight over people's social choices and views rather than, wow, what's empowering the state more than anything. So that is really good. It's an opportunity to bring people together like they were in the Ron Paul movement, opposing the number one thing that empowers the state, that is war. So that is a big deal. So, but when Trump met with Kim, I literally had tears in my eyes. I cried about it not because it was two peacemakers meeting, but because over the last 70 years, no one has done this. And yet they were getting attacked like this is evil. I saw some jokes that were like, because a lot of people were saying, how can Trump meet with a dictator? I saw some people posting memes with like, how can that dictator meet with the only country that has ever used a nuclear weapon? So, I mean, it goes both ways. It's all perspective. But talking with each other rather than pointing guns at each other is always a positive step forward. I think that was huge.
Now, let me ask you a hypothetical, change direction here a little bit. If the neocons and the John Boltons and Lindsey Grahams of the world, if they were able to get their war in Iran, do you think John McCain would rise from the dead?
He's in Argentina with Hitler.
Well, they're probably about the same age, so it's fine. It's fine. I just wanted to throw that in there so that people understand what kind of program this is.
I don't know if it's going to be Iran, but it'll be. I mean, I've been concerned about this as well. I was frightened of the aggressive talk against North Korea. I'm like, man, this is brinkmanship. And it was. I think it's dangerous to threaten nuclear war, like smashing countries in the hopes that they'll capitulate. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe it was a brilliant chess move. Maybe. And the positive results are in Korea so far. Even if it doesn't come to fruition, we can at least say that the foundation is laid. But I don't think threatening people with crazy amounts of violence and death and destruction is really a positive thing, because some people are going to just reject that. And then if you don't follow through, then you've got a whole nother problem. So we can talk about, I have fears of war with Iran and Syria and elsewhere, crazy wars. But we know what's already happening if we're ignoring the fact that during the Bush years, Bush dropped an average of about 8,000 bombs per year around the world. Really bad. Everyone thought he was horrible on war. When Obama came in, it went up to like 12,000 per year. Even worse than Bush, the peace president. But Trump in his first year dropped 44,000 bombs. So if we're afraid about wars that might come, certainly they're already happening all around the world.
Yeah. Well, what bothers me sometimes is when you share statistics like you just did about, you know, annual bomb dropping. I think we've reached a point where it's kind of like the national debt. That's an imaginary number.
Yeah. When
people hear that, when your average person on the street hears what you just said, they can't imagine that. They can't visualize what that means and how destructive that is and how much that costs. It's just I don't see it in my daily life, so I'm just going to ignore that even exists. But that leads me to I think the number one.
Let me throw something in there if it's cool.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, that's why I put it in that kind of perspective, because if you hear 44,000 or 2 trillion or 10 billion or whatever it may be, it's just some crazy national number. Well, my life isn't totally destroyed, so I don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
But I put it in terms of George Bush. I don't think many people would ever think of George Bush as being the peace guy. He was known as a guy who basically helmed a giant war in the Middle East. Well, if Trump is dropping bombs at 4 times plus, almost 5 times the rate that George Bush did. That in itself is the perspective. Because even if the numbers mean nothing, it could be 200 to 500 or 1 million to 5 million. The fact of the matter is, I think we all see George Bush as the war guy. And if Trump is being worse than that, he's certainly not the peace guy.
So
very true.
You know what we're gonna do? So everybody's heard like the game 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
We're gonna do 6 wars to George Bush.
There you go.
So if you're within 6 wars of, Cheney. If you're within 6 wars of George Bush, then you're a swamp monster. Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is that you talking about being in Tennessee and being around Trumpers is there are people walking up and down the sidewalk outside the studio right now.
Hey, I'm around Bernie people constantly.
Oh gosh, yeah. So
I don't know which is worse.
There are people walking up and down the street right now, Michael, who would not agree with anything that we've said because they genuinely think, but wait a minute, all the wars have ended and the economy's way up and everything's way better under Trump. Don't you read the news, you cuck, or whatever word they're going to use? And I say, but hold on a second, is that let's just presume for a second that we're having a disconnection because we're getting our information from different sources. Don't you understand, on a basic level, your whole premise was he's draining the swamp. Do you honestly think a guy that surrounds himself with people like John Bolton has any interest in draining the swamp? Really?
John Bolton is one of the worst human beings alive on Earth.
Yes. Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yes. And he's in the White House.
Yep. Well, so for a little while, I started thinking with the Korea thing that this was a game of chess, and maybe it is. I'm going to keep that just to be. I don't like the president, and I'm not talking about Trump. I don't like the president. I've never liked anyone in my entire life. They've all been bad. So I got to be honest, though. It is possible that if you're trying to be strategic and you want to bring people to the table, that you scare them. I mean, I don't think that's a positive way, but it is possible. That is basically how it's been playing out in Korea. So could that happen in another place? I hope so. I hope all the rhetoric doesn't lead to what the rhetoric is saying. I hope it leads to peace, because Trump talked about bringing the troops home before he got into office.
Yeah.
So that would be the way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's possible. Only hindsight is going to tell us. The fact of the matter is that the warfare has ramped up in this administration, no matter what anyone wants to believe. It is a fact. We sent this out as an email campaign to our subscribers recently, and very few people got mad about it. But someone specifically said, and I think this is the mentality, they said, stop spreading propaganda. That is false, and even if it isn't, he's probably just doing something good. So the mentality is, you're making this up, but I don't care if you're making it up or not. Because the fact of the matter is, we got the numbers from the Air Force. The Air Force told us how many bombs have been dropped per year.
Yeah.
They do a report every single year at Air Force Central Command. But his mentality is, I'm not going to look into that. And if I do look into it, I am more in line with the person than the policy. If the person does a policy that I would generally oppose, I'm just going to change my view.
Yeah. See, that we just talked about this last week, and it bothers me a lot that I would consider us a success. I already consider the 10th Amendment Center a success, but I would consider all of us in this movement a success if we can flip the switch of the public consciousness to be a default distrust of government. I'm terribly afraid, I'm not shocked, but I'm afraid that the average American's default position is, if Washington says it, it must be necessary. And that could not be, that's horrible.
Well, I think that does switch in a partisan manner. So during the Obama years, when we had the imperial presidency doing all kinds of horrible stuff, waging war, expanding mass surveillance, asset forfeiture, the drug war, all these things, or signing statements, whatever it may be, it was because it was necessary, or people are going to die in the streets, or there's a constitutional or a legal justification for it. But now that it's switched, we see the right now taking that position. at least registered Republicans. There are very good conservatives that are like, nah, I'm not into this at all. I'm a conservative person, but this is garbage. So there is a segment there that's very solid on this. But on the other hand, the left doesn't trust the presidency. What I would hope, and I think this is what happens year in and year out, and at least in our 12 and a half years or so of doing this, we recognize that at every switch of power in Washington, D.C., a few people fall off or fall in line with, I don't trust them no matter who's in power. So the left all over the place, they don't trust the executive branch, and we're seeing more and more. Just recently, the ACLU put out a statement on this whole kind of social media deplatforming thing that's going on. Ben Weisner, who is Edward Snowden's attorney that Mike and I met a few years ago. Cool story about that one if you want to get into it. But he wrote an article for the Huffington Post talking about this, and it was directed towards progressives. And he didn't take an aggressive stand in support of Alex Jones or anything. He basically said, look, if you keep supporting this type of activity based on the political viewpoints of the person that's the target, eventually it will come back to, quote, bite you.
Yeah.
And there are some people on the left that are warning about this. And they will continue. Glenn Greenwald warns about this. They stay consistent depending, no matter who the administration is. We just need more and more on the left and the right to do that over time.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess you're a more optimistic guy than I am.
I'm a cynic, but maybe not as cynical as you.
Well, you know, and I definitely prefer to call it 27D mahjong than 4D chess. But with that said, it just reminds my cynical self more and more that if all it takes is a change of colors on the drapes in the White House to flip a quarter of the entire country's opinion, then those people don't have any principles.
Yeah,
they don't have principles. So what
they do? Their principle is support political party, support my guy in office. That's their principle. That's their foundation. I'm team Republican or team Democrat. So they do have a foundation. It's just a crappy one.
Yeah. Well, they should be physically removed.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Not stable.
Yeah. Now, I want to switch gears again because, you know, it wouldn't be the gold standard if we weren't going to pick fights and cause trouble. There was a really cool conversation that got had down there in New Orleans. There he goes again. Yeah. That happened down in New Orleans that I kind of want to expound on here on the show. And I'm going to use these words, and we can work on definitions for the sake of the conversation, but don't you do a whataboutism to me, Michael Boldin. In the libertarian community, in the liberty movement, not everybody gets along. And that's okay. That's fine. It's not every human being on this planet is on a social level going to get along with every other human being on this planet.
I don't even get along with myself half the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we don't get along. As soon as this is over, we're done. We're never going to speak again.
You think all these heart emojis are real?
No, I certainly don't. But the audience does, and that's all that matters. I want to talk about the difference between the cosmopolitan libertarian and the conservative libertarian. And me and Mike Meharry had actually talked about this right before I went on with you, is I was trying to figure out the best word for conservative. I don't know if traditionalist libertarian, conservative libertarian, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like a little bit more of the socially conservative, but politically, philosophically libertarian. Versus it's
literally the debate between urbanites and suburbanites that happens in all aspects of life. I'm an urbanite. I haven't owned a car in over a decade. My transit is on trains, Uber, bike, walk. I live in the middle of the second largest city of the country. My lifestyle is walking. Like when I go to the grocery store, I stop by a market 2 blocks down, and I'm like, what do they have fresh today? And
I can't even
everything is
that.
on foot. It's a different type of a lifestyle. Well, when people come in from the suburbs, they're not used to urban walking traffic. And they're not paying attention to people crossing the street and almost kill you all the time. So there's a conflict there.
That might just be you. That might just be you.
Well, I probably deserve it.
Okay.
Well,
but I mean, to the point,
there is a conflict in lifestyle.
Yes.
So I think there are libertarians who are of the type that want to have a ranch, have some chickens, live out in an open space, and just be left alone. And then there are libertarians who want to be part of like the Uber culture in the cities, and they're different lifestyles. But instead of just recognizing like, oh, hey man, that like My buddy Jordan Page lives in basically a covenant community in the Pacific Northwest, and his life is like goats and chickens, and when the road breaks down, the community comes together and fills potholes and does all this stuff. Like, that's not going to happen in downtown Los Angeles, but I love that they're doing it. It's not my lifestyle. I don't even want to do that. I can't change my own light bulb.
We just call Domino's to do that.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's the best.
So there's different lifestyles, so people are fighting over the lifestyles. There's the cosmopolitan kind of the hippie, the progressive lifestyle choices that don't match with a more down-home country-style conservative. And instead of just recognizing that these are just two sides of the same coin, that they actually play off each other and support each other, people will fight over that. And I think the powers that be want people fighting over that.
Yeah. Well, I've said on this show, look, we've had Jeffrey Tucker on this show, and
I love Tucker.
there's some people that don't like Jeffrey Tucker, and I don't know on a personal level who likes who and why, but I love Jeffrey Tucker.
That's juicy.
I mean, I think he was such an amazing guest. He was so gracious and giving of his time, and he's done such incredible works. And I've had Tom Woods on the show, and some people don't like Tom Woods, and I love Tom Woods, and I think he's done incredible work, and he's influenced a lot of people.
Tom Woods.
And those are different people. You know, those are different. I mean, you have your Reasons and your Catos and your Miseses. Some of those are in Washington, D.C. Some of those are in Auburn, Alabama. And
Reason is right here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, in Los Angeles. So those are very different places.
They've never invited me to an event, not once.
Imagine that. Can you even?
Why?
Yeah.
He's great.
Well, I mean, I could tell you why, but that being neither here nor there, I mean, I'm not trying to shit on any one organization or person. What I'm just pointing out is that each of those, even if you hated one, somebody there has contributed something really positive to our movement. And if
like
you
David Bowes, I can clearly say is a really mean human being at Cato, right?
Yeah.
He really is just a vicious person. And he's out to attack people's person.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. But there are very good people at Cato that I have worked with that have done really good research or books or writing. So that doesn't mean the Institute of Cato is bad, but individuals. So if we're talking about individual liberty, we shouldn't be in groupthink. We should think about the individuals that and their actions on whether we think they are good or bad.
Well, it's just something, and Tom had said this last week that, look, I'm not going to sit here and carry all the water for, there's problems in the libertarian community, because if you don't think that there's infighting amongst Republicans and Democrats or Marxists or socialists or anybody else, then you haven't been paying attention.
I think the left is even more so, but where the left excels, and I come from this personally, where the left excels is in coalition building, where they actually I have found the left to be excellent on setting aside differences for one issue. They hate each other on everything, but on one issue they set things aside and they move things forward. And that's why things have progressed to the left so far, because they're better at it. The right in general has shunned organizing activism as a general rule. For many years we heard that activism and grassroots work is a, quote, tool of the left. Well, it has been, and they've used that tool well. So we can learn that in the liberty world as well. Just learn what they do. I always point out immigration sanctuary cities, because no one talks about immigration sanctuary cities by saying, you know what, I don't like those immigration sanctuary cities because they say things I don't like. Yeah. They only complain about them because they're clearly effective in doing something against federal immigration enforcement. So why not research what they're doing, figure out how they've done such a good job of it, or bad job, depending on your perspective, but how they've been so effective, learn what they've done and put it into practice on guns.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I try to tell people, being the cynic that I am, is that, look, when Colin Kaepernick comes up in the news, and I actually purposely didn't button my shirt all the way up today. I just want to trigger people.
What's it say?
It's a Nike logo. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
But when that's in the news, or Trump did this, and whether or not it's good or bad or whatever, and there's all the back and forth and the right, left, blue, red, it's that. libertarians, and look, I'm calling us out, they'll point at that and say, well, look, there you go. This is why they suck and we're good. But then at the same time, it'll be, well, Reason published this piece and they didn't talk to so-and-so. And it'll be, well, Mises didn't invite such and such to the last forum. And it's like, wow, so the state is still controlling our lives and murdering people around the world. But it's so good you took some time out to argue about Cato and Reason and Mises. Thank God you have that much free time to be worrying about those issues when the greater battles are there to be fought.
Yeah, I really think that libertarians have an opportunity to lead us out of the quagmire. I gave a speech at Pork Fest 10, so 5 or 6 years ago. I was also a pinch hitter. Lou Rockwell had a back issue. He was originally the keynote, and my friend Mike Vine hit me up a week in advance. Hey, man, can you do a keynote here at Pork Fest?
That seems to be a pattern with you.
Oh, I'm always the backup.
Okay.
Woods brought me in as a backup to Bob Murphy in his roast at his 1000th episode event. I was the backup pinch hitter. I was the backup in New Orleans for the.
Well, we wanted to have Dave Smith
tour.
On today, but
I'm a backup today.
No, I'm just kidding. No, Michael,
it would be awesome.
Michael,
From now
you're
on,
our
I'm
number
just going to tell
one.
people you should book somebody else and then call me when they aren't available.
Well, I've heard that really, really chic shows have Michael Boldin as their first ever guest.
That's right.
Well, we didn't have you as our first ever guest, but you are our first guest of season 2. So you're
That's
like
right.
the backup
That's
to
right.
our season. So there you go.
I don't even know about season 1. It didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, trust me, most people don't know about season 1, so it's fine.
So my speech at Pork Fest was, and it's interesting at the Free State Project because there's a really cool mix of ANCAPs. Your audience knows all this stuff, right?
Yes.
This kind of language.
They're
Okay,
not
so
listening to me. It's fine.
Okay, so it's a mix of ANCAPs plus political activist libertarians. So they work, some people work to get legislation passed, some people work to get elected, and then there's other people creating an underground economy. So when I first got there, one of my earliest times, I got taken to all these gray market or illegal businesses like nightclub and a bar and a pool hall. There's all these things happening in New Hampshire that are really cool, these agorist events and businesses that are happening. But my speech actually focused there, and this is my kind of approach to things. It basically said, put down the books and start doing stuff. And I gave examples of people doing stuff, because the best example when someone says, who will build the roads, is to build the freaking roads and show, look, this happens. We know this has already happened on weed. I talk about cannabis all the time, especially being a Californian. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I was talking about nullifying federal marijuana prohibition in the states or in local communities, right-wing audiences were angry. You can't do this. This is bad. People are going to die. Well, just this summer, Oklahoma, the reddest of the red states, they passed the most broad medical marijuana law in American history. That's because over time, people learned on the right and left that having a plant does not mean people die in the streets. And maybe some people can get rich off of it as well. So lead by example, create businesses, create the societies that we want to see that have more liberty. And then people learn from seeing it in practice. No one's going to, I mean, some people will come over to the fold reading Man, Economy, and State.
Sure.
But more people are going to come into the fold against gun control if, like the people I'm working with in Eastern Oregon right now, if they create 5 or 6 gun rights sanctuary counties, which they're trying to do, where they don't have any gun control enforcement. And when people are safer there, someone else is going to learn somewhere else. Whoa, I can do that here. And I thought people would die if there were more guns. And now they're not, because they're putting it in practice rather than just doing reports.
Well, I mean, you know, and to be fair, look, people are going to die anyway, so you might as well do drugs. I mean, is that not, I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
The hashtag is guns and weed.
In a nutshell.
Guns and weeds. Well, Michael, we're
the short version, though, is the more that libertarians can lead by example locally, the more that they can point to something and say, no, what you're telling us about the state protecting us from blank is wrong, and we can prove it here. Not just hypothetical, not just theory, not just philosophy. And the more that people focus on that, the less they'll focus on political infighting. They'll just be doing stuff and living more freely.
Sure. Well, we're starting to get a little bit of low on time, so so that we don't forget, I want you to go ahead and give us.
I'm not ready to go.
Well, I mean, you don't have to go right away, but I want to make sure we don't forget. Would everybody just shut up for a minute? Michael, I want you to share with everybody at home any links or URLs, any pages that you want to share so that people can support the 10th Amendment Center.
The number one place people should go is 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. It's our annual State of the Nullification Movement report. It's a 70-page free download, basically a once a year white paper. The first section talks about all the strategy and philosophy and legal stuff that we do, and the second section shows how we've been putting into practice on various issues: surveillance, gun control, healthcare freedom, asset forfeiture, and on and on and on. And people can see that these things, people are living more free by decentralizing their political activism, decentralizing what they think about and what they do, and hopefully it'll catch on and grow. And it has been year after year. We keep getting bigger and bigger at this.
You know what? Not only do I like that, I'm going to go ahead and tell people there's 2 links. The second one is 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. That's where they really need to go. Because
the buy-in, though, really is to see the work we're doing. And then, of course, I mean, Jim Babka at Downsize DC years ago, who I found him through, he was Harry Brown's campaign manager, and he did a show with Harry for many years, or did his own show as well. But he used to tell me, he's like, Michael, you don't ask for money enough. You're right. I don't. I don't. It feels weird, but it's so important because certainly I'm lucky enough to have just enough money where I can do this full time. I can also pay a couple of other people to do it part time. But if we had more cash, we could really, I mean, the fact that we raise so little money in comparison to large think tanks, if we had even just a small bump in our receipts, the impact would be massive.
Mm-hmm. Michael, are you good on time? You got a little bit more time to spend with us?
No.
Okay, well then that's it. That's all the time we have.
I got a couple.
Okay, if you got a little bit more time, I think we're going to do like a little overtime segment, but we'll do that as an extra for this week. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode for right now. I want to get you out of here on this one before we do our links. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Ooh.
Without a bun? Just a hot dog? No.
No. Okay.
New.
No, okay.
We haven't got that one yet.
No, so to be clear, it's the whole product.
Weird.
Like the hot dog in the bun, condiments, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No, it's a roll, right? Doesn't feel like a sandwich.
This is a roll.
Feels like its own. Never been asked this question. I'm gonna go with no.
Okay.
Mark that one down for no.
For no.
Well, you can never come on the show again. That's just awful. So just so that you can be prepared in the future when this happens to you again, because this is really the hot button issue in America. Yeah.
Oh, man, that makes me sad.
That's by the way, this is going to be a first-time thing for us on the show.
The best part is I was trying to read your face to determine what answer you wanted. I really have no philosophical foundation on the hot dog, which means I'm as bad as a Republican or a Democrat on hot dogs.
Yeah, you have no principles. That's right.
And I failed to read the market. So I'm bad at business.
Okay, so here's the thing: is that look, if it were literally just the link, a hot dog, that's a sausage.
Actually was.
That's a sausage.
Yeah.
Technically, yes.
But the whole thing inside of the bun, that's a sandwich.
It's a sandwich.
It's an inconvenient truth.
Yes.
That's a sandwich.
Face it.
Is it an open-faced sandwich?
You're an open-faced sandwich. I can't even talk to you anymore. So, guys, people...
It's basically avocado toast.
Yeah. That's the first time you ever heard. Get a hipster like Michael Boldin on here to talk about... We don't have avocado toast.
Avocado?
With radishes and wheatgrass.
We just have biscuits and gravy until we die.
Dude,
that's what
bacon.
happens.
Come on.
Yeah. So, guys, Facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is at Alan M. Mosley, but don't follow at Michael Boldin. That's a terrible idea. Our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com, on all your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, including iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. We will see you next week.